Want to get started with a list that Yahoo Sports came out with earlier this week, their top 30 number 2 options in the NBA as it stands right now. Let me give you the top 10 before we get into the segment. Anthony Davis, Devin Booker, Jaylen Brown, those are your top 3. Bam Adebayo, Jamal Murray, and Domantas Sabonis are 4, 5, and 6. Kyrie Irving, Karl Anthony Towns, and Pascal Siakam are your 7, 8, and 9. And rounding out the top 10 is Damian Lillard of the Milwaukee Bucks. And when I look at this list, the first question that I'm asking is, who is a guy that's a number 2 option from that top 10 that needs to have a big season for their team to have success down the road in hopes to hoisting that Larry O'Brien trophy and winning an NBA championship? And I think that the writers at Yahoo got it right, that the number 2 option that is ranked at number 1 for them is Anthony Davis. This is a guy that you can argue in 2020 was the best player on the Los Angeles Lakers and probably was a top 5, top 7 talent in the NBA at large before we got into the bubble. But even then, when you get to the bubble in Orlando, he was still looked at as probably the best player in the bubble, maybe even arguably in the league. He was an absolute dominant force for LA. And I understand that it has been a whirlwind for Anthony Davis for quite some time now with the Los Angeles Lakers. You've had different coaches, you've had different roster setups, but I think this year for Anthony Davis and with JJ Redick, at least from what you hear from the new Lakers head coach, they are going to use him immensely offensively for the purple and gold. They are going to set him up to be successful. They are going to put him in certain spots where they know he can dominate, where he's not going to have to go 6-minute stretches where he doesn't touch the floor or doesn't touch the ball for that matter in key moments of the game where you're going to need the brow to be dominant. Now, when you look at last season, you can make an argument that this guy should have been Defensive Player of the Year. And isn't that an interesting thing that Anthony Davis, as great as he's been, he has yet to win an MVP or a Defensive Player of the Year. Those are the accolades that elude him right now in his career. And I agree with Richard Jefferson when he said this on ESPN that Anthony Davis, if he retires now and he doesn't have Defensive Player of the Year or MVP honors or accolades, either one of those two, if not both, that may be one of the biggest slights in his career. I do believe that LeBron James, as great as he was in year 21, now going into year 22, I think he's going to lean on Anthony Davis. And if you look at this roster, nobody's saying that they're in contention of making the NBA Finals. And heck, if they make the NBA playoffs, it may come again from winning in the play-in round just to make the NBA playoffs once again. But Anthony Davis, I think this is going to rest on his shoulders when it comes to the success of the Los Angeles Lakers. This is going to be a year in which I expect him to be very dominant. He played over 60 games this past season for the LA Lakers. I expect more of the same coming into this season. He's going to play the 5, although he has expressed that he does want to play with another big, similar to what he did when guys like JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard were on the roster, where he was able and had the ability to slide down to the 4. And I do believe that's where he can be really successful, when you can give him that option of playing the power forward or the center position. But either way that he wants to play this, Anthony Davis is going to have to be a guy that's going to be supremely dominant for the LA Lakers if they have hopes of having, 1, a successful year, and then 2, having a deep playoff run. And the second guy in which I believe needs to have a big season for their team in order to make the NBA playoffs and have a deep playoff run, potentially winning the NBA championship, although it's going to be a long road out east, is going to be Damian Lillard, who was selected at number 10 as the top 2 option. This is a much older Milwaukee Bucks team. They now have made a coaching change in the middle of the year. You brought in Doc Rivers. You guys looked great the second half of the season. I thought that this was going to be a team that wasn't necessarily going to be a sleeper team, but it just felt to me that they were showing their dominance once again in the Eastern Conference and probably looked like the strongest team, not named the Boston Celtics, that we could have seen when it came to the Eastern Conference Finals round last season in the NBA. Damian Lillard, I understand, had a few distractions. It didn't seem to me that Milwaukee was his first choice in where he wanted to go, although Giannis is a guy that he said he would have loved to play with in his career before ultimately getting traded to the Milwaukee Bucks. But it seemed to me that Milwaukee really isn't his style. It also feels to me that what was going on in his personal life was kind of bleeding into his play when it came on to the basketball court. This season, he is going to have to show that he can be the best number 2 option on a championship team. I think the number 1 option days are done. That happened when he left Portland. Portland has now decided that they are going to go in a rebuilding situation. That's why you ultimately let Damian Lillard go and you traded for him to go to the Milwaukee Bucks. He'll have a chance to win the championship. This almost feels like a Kobe and Shaq kind of duo in this respect. Like Darius Miles has said, it seemed like Shaq would punch you and punch you and punch you and punch you for the first 3 quarters. And if the game was close in the 4th, you knew that Kobe Bryant was going to end it. I think it has to be the same thing with the Milwaukee Bucks. Let Giannis punch everybody in the mouth the first 3 quarters. And if the game is close, it's going to have to be Dame time at the end of the day. I do believe that he has the capacity to do it. I also understand that he was a guy that didn't want to have to do this, at least this way, when it came to winning a championship. He wanted to be like a Kobe Bryant, like a Dirk Nowitzki, stay in one location through all the hard times, through all the good times, and ultimately win an NBA championship. Well, that's now in the rearview mirror, but you have a great opportunity to come out of the East and represent that conference in the NBA Finals. It's going to be a long road because you do have teams like Boston. You have teams like Philly. You have teams such as the New York Knicks. And you also have young teams that are going to want to make some noise in the Eastern Conference as well, such as the New York Knicks and the Indiana Pacers, as well as the Orlando Magic. This has to be the time in which you take advantage of what's in front of you if you are the Milwaukee Bucks. Not necessarily saying that this is going to be a team that is going to run roughshod over every single team that in which they have seen, because granted, this is a much older team now. They do have a lot of question marks on them as well. And you look at a guy like Chris Middleton, you're hoping that this guy can stay healthy throughout the regular season, but he's going to fall to the number 3 option, in my opinion, when it comes to the Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis is your franchise piece, but you did give up a lot to get Damian Lillard because you felt that he gave you a better opportunity to stay in the championship conversation, if not win an NBA championship. Damian Lillard being the number 10, number 2 option in the NBA, as told by Yahoo Sports, is going to have to show everyone in the league that it is Dame time all season long. But those are my thoughts on the number 2 options. We would love to hear yours in the comment section below. But when we come back, we'll be talking about another guy who was ranked in the top 10 when it comes to number 2 options in the NBA, and that's Karl Anthony Towns. How does he have to play for the Minnesota Timberwolves to get to the NBA Finals? They were one step away from it this past season. How do they get past that and represent the West in the championship round? We talk all that and more with Chris Hine of the Minnesota Star Tribune right here on Open Gym on 1010XL and 92.5 FM.